The alarm systems across the Valoran warship screamed with an urgency that Commander Thursday had never heard before. His brow widened as he stared at the display screen, his scaled hands gripping the command console so hard that his claws left marks in the metal. "Sir, the readings make no sense," his sensor officer said, her voice shaking. "The anomaly is collapsing." Thrick felt his twin hearts hammering in his chest. For 1,000 years, the space where Earth's solar system once existed had been nothing but a sphere of twisted spacetime. Scientists from 47 different species had studied it, poked at it, and tried to understand it. None had succeeded. The humans had simply vanished one day, and the mystery had haunted the galaxy ever since. "Get me the Concilium High Command," Thrix ordered. The communication officer worked frantically at her station. Within moments, the face of Admiral Vestrin appeared on the main screen. The elderly Kryn's face tentacles twitched with concern. "Commander, report," the Admiral said. "Sir, the anomaly is breaking down. I'm reading normal spacetime forming where the barrier used to be. And Admiral, I'm picking up massive energy signatures, thousands of them." Admiral Vestrin was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "Hold your position, Commander. Do not approach. Do not make any hostile moves. I'm dispatching the diplomatic corps immediately." The next 6 hours felt like 6 years to Thrick. He watched as his sensors gradually cleared, revealing what had been hidden for a millennium. What they showed him made his blood run cold. The solar system had returned, but it was completely transformed. Every planet had structures around it, massive rings that glittered in the light of the system's star. That star itself was partially enclosed in a shell of panels, a Dyson swarm that captured its energy. Space stations the size of moons orbited every major body. And ships, so many ships. "Weapons analysis?" Thrick asked quietly. His tactical officer looked up from her console, her face pale. "Sir, I can't get clear readings on most of them. The technology is too advanced for our sensors to properly identify. But the ships I can analyze are each more powerful than our entire battle group." Thrick had fought in 3 wars during his career. He had faced down pirate fleets and enemy armadas. He knew the smell of fear, and he was smelling it now on his bridge crew. "Incoming transmission," the communication officer announced. "It's from Earth." "Put it through," Thrick said. The screen changed to show a human woman. She appeared to be in her middle years, with dark hair pulled back from her face and wearing a simple gray uniform. Her smile was warm, but her eyes were sharp and calculating. "Valoran vessel, this is Ambassador Chun Wei of Earth. We mean you no harm. We understand our return must be quite shocking. We would like to open peaceful communications with the Galactic Concilium. May we speak?" Thrick straightened in his command chair. "Ambassador Chun, I am Commander Thrick of the Valoran Navy, representing the Galactic Concilium. Your disappearance has been one of the greatest mysteries of the past millennium. Where have you been?" Ambassador Chen's smile widened slightly. "We didn't go anywhere, Commander. We've been right here the entire time. We simply needed some privacy while we worked through some things. May I invite you to Earth? I believe a face-to-face conversation would be beneficial for both our peoples." Every instinct Thrick had developed over his military career told him this was dangerous. But he also knew that refusing would be seen as cowardice by the Concilium. And if these humans had truly become this advanced, refusing might also be interpreted as hostility. "I accept your invitation, Ambassador," he said. "But I must inform my superiors first." "Of course," Chin said. "Take all the time you need. We've waited 1,000 years. A few more hours won't matter." The transmission ended. Thrick immediately contacted Admiral Vestrin and relayed the conversation. "Accept their invitation," the Admiral ordered. "But Commander, be careful. We have no idea what we're dealing with. The humans were barely capable of basic interstellar travel when they vanished. This level of advancement shouldn't be possible in just 1,000 years." Thrick thought the same thing, but he kept his concerns to himself. Within an hour, he was aboard a shuttle heading toward Earth, accompanied by a small security detail and his senior science officer. As they approached the blue and green planet, Thrick science officer gasped. Commander, look at the orbital structures. Those aren't just stations, they're interconnected. The entire planet is surrounded by a defensive network unlike anything in our databases. The shuttle was guided down by automated systems to a landing platform in what the computers identified as the region once called China. As the doors opened, Thrick got his first breath of Earth's atmosphere. It was rich and clean, filled with the scent of growing things. Ambassador Chun was waiting for them, flanked by two other humans. One was a tall man with dark skin and silver hair. The other was a younger woman with red hair and a cybernetic eye that glowed faintly blue. Commander Thrick, welcome to Earth, Chun said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. Thrick had studied human customs and knew to grasp it gently. Thank you for receiving us, Ambassador. I must admit, I have many questions. I'm sure you do, Chun said. Please walk with me. I'll explain what happened. They walked through a garden that seemed to blend nature and technology seamlessly. Trees grew alongside crystalline structures that hummed with power. The sky above was clear and blue, but Thrick could see the faint shimmer of the orbital rings. 1,000 years ago, by your reckoning, humanity faced a choice. Chun began. We had just made contact with our first alien species, the Zephrons. They told us about the galaxy, about the Concilium, about the thousands of species that filled the stars. We were excited. We wanted to join, to learn, to grow. She paused by a fountain, watching the water cascade over smooth stones. But we also learned something troubling. We learned that young species like ours were often taken advantage of by older civilizations. We learned that the galaxy had rules that favored those who were already powerful. We learned that if we joined the Concilium as we were, we would be junior partners at best, subjects at worst for thousands of years. The Concilium protects younger species, Thrick said, though even he heard the doubt in his own voice. Perhaps, Chin said, but protection comes with a price. We would have to accept Concilium laws, Concilium trade agreements, Concilium limitations on our military and our exploration. We would be safe, yes, but we would also be controlled. She started walking again, leading them toward a large building that seemed to be made of living crystal. So we made a different choice. Our scientists had been studying temporal mechanics, trying to understand the nature of time itself. They discovered something remarkable. It was possible to create a bubble of accelerated time around our entire solar system. Inside the bubble, time would move faster, much faster. Thrick felt his mind struggling to grasp what she was saying. You created a time acceleration field around your entire star system? Yes, Chen said simply. We calculated that if we set it correctly, 1,000 years would pass outside while 100,000 years passed inside. We would have time to grow, to develop, to become something greater. And then, when we were ready, we would return to the galaxy. 100,000 years, Thrick's science officer whispered. That's impossible. No species could maintain social cohesion for that long. Ambassador Chun stopped and turned to face them. Her expression was serious now. It wasn't easy, she said. The first few thousand years were the hardest. We had wars. We had disasters. We nearly destroyed ourselves more than once. But we survived. We learned, we grew, and eventually we became unified in a way that we never could have been if we'd remained connected to the greater galaxy. She gestured to the man with silver hair. This is Dr. James Morrison. He was born on Earth before we activated the temporal field. He's 123,000 years old. Thrick stared at the human man, who smiled gently. We conquered death about 40,000 years into our isolation, Dr. Morrison said. His voice was deep and calm. Not completely, of course. People can still choose to die and accidents still happen. But aging, disease, the simple wearing down of the body, we solve those problems. Why are you telling us this? Thrick asked. Why reveal your capabilities so openly? Because hiding them would be pointless, Ambassador Chun said. Your sensors have already detected our orbital structures. Your strategic analysts are probably having panic attacks right now trying to estimate our military capacity. And because we don't want there to be any misunderstandings about what humanity has become. They entered the crystalline building, and Thrick found himself in a vast chamber. The walls displayed countless images, showing the history of humanity's isolation. He saw cities that floated in the clouds. He saw ships that bent space around them. He saw humans working alongside artificial intelligences that seemed as alive as any biological being. We spent 100,000 years preparing for this moment, Chen said. We knew that when we returned, the galaxy would be frightened of us. We knew that some would see us as a threat. We knew that others would want to control us or exploit us. So we made sure that neither of those things would be possible. She turned to face Thrick directly. Commander, I need you to understand something very important. Humanity doesn't want to conquer the galaxy. We don't want to rule over other species. We simply want to exist as equals, free to determine our own destiny. But we will not accept subjugation. We will not allow ourselves to be limited by laws written by others. And we will not permit any force in the galaxy to threaten our freedom. Thrick felt the weight of her words. This was a declaration, not a threat, but also not a request. The Concilium will want to know your military capabilities, he said carefully. Of course they will, Chen said. And we'll be happy to demonstrate them if necessary, but we hope that won't be required. We hope that the Concilium will be willing to accept humanity as an independent power, not a member state, but an ally. Some members of the Concilium won't like that, Thrick warned. The Draken Empire, in particular, has strong views about military parity and the balance of power. Yes, we know about the Draken, Chen said. Her voice was still friendly, but there was steel beneath it. We've been listening to Galactic Communications for the past year. We know about the political factions in the Concilium. We know about the tensions between the Drawn and the Zephrons. We know quite a lot, actually. Thrick felt a chill run through his body. You've been spying on us. We prefer to think of it as intelligence gathering. The woman with the cybernetic eye said, speaking for the first time. I'm Director Sarah Kim, head of the External Intelligence Service. We sent out stealth probes before we dropped the temporal barrier. They've been monitoring galactic communications and building a database of current events. We wanted to know what we were returning to. That's an act of espionage, Thrick said, his voice harder now. No, Chen said firmly. It's an act of prudence. We had no idea if the galaxy would greet us as friends or enemies. We had no way of knowing if aggressive species had come to dominate during our absence. We took reasonable precautions to ensure our survival. Surely you can understand that. Thrick wanted to argue, but he couldn't. If he were in their position, he would have done the same thing. In fact, the Concilium probably would have tried to do exactly what humanity had done if they'd possessed the technology. What happens now? He asked. Now you return to the Concilium and you tell them what you've seen, Chen said. You tell them that humanity has returned, that we're willing to engage in peaceful relations, but that we will defend our independence. And then we wait to see how they respond. And if they respond with force? Thrick asked. Ambassador Chen's smile returned, but it didn't reach her eyes. Then they'll learn that 100,000 years of preparation was more than enough time to become very, very good at defending ourselves. But we hope it doesn't come to that, Commander. We really do. As Thrick returned to his ship, his mind was racing. He had been a soldier for most of his life. He understood tactics and strategy, and what he understood right now terrified him. Humanity had returned to the galaxy, but they weren't the young, naive species that had disappeared a millennium ago. They had transformed themselves into something the galaxy had never seen before. They had taken themselves out of the normal flow of time and history, and they had used that separation to evolve beyond anything that should have been possible. The question now was whether the galaxy would be wise enough to accept them as they were, or foolish enough to challenge them. As his shuttle lifted off from Earth, Thrick looked back at the blue planet below. It looked peaceful and beautiful, but he knew now that beneath that beauty was a power that could reshape the entire galaxy. Somewhere in the depths of space, heading toward Concilium space, the implications of humanity's return were about to send shockwaves through every species, every empire, and every government that called the galaxy home. The age of human isolation was over. The age of humanity as a galactic power had just begun. The Concilium High Council chamber was in chaos. Representatives from 47 species argued with each other, their voices creating a cacophony that echoed off the ancient stone walls. Commander Thrick stood at the center podium, waiting for order to be restored. Admiral Vestrin slammed his gavel 3 times, the sound booming through the chamber. Order. We will have order. The elderly Kryn's face tentacles were bright red with frustration. Commander Thrick has traveled to Earth and returned with information we desperately need. I will have silence while he speaks. The chamber gradually quieted. Thrick could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on him. He activated his holo display, and images of Earth's transformed solar system appeared above him. What you see here is the current state of the solar system, Thrick began. Every planet has been encased in orbital infrastructure. The star itself is surrounded by a Dyson swarm that captures approximately 40% of its total energy output. My science team estimates that the energy production of the solar system exceeds the combined output of the 10 most industrialized Concilium worlds. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Draken representative, War Master Croth, stood up. He was massive even by drawn standards, his scaled body covered in ceremonial armor that marked him as one of the greatest warriors of his people. Commander, are you telling this council that a species that was barely capable of basic spaceflight has somehow surpassed our most advanced civilizations? Croth's voice dripped with skepticism. I'm telling you what I observed, Thrick replied evenly. The humans didn't experience 1,000 years of development. They experienced 100,000 years. They used temporal acceleration technology to effectively skip forward in their own timeline while remaining in the same space. That's impossible, said Representative Kixara of the Mthodian Collective. Her crystalline body chimed with disbelief. No known science supports such technology. Nevertheless, they did it, Thrick said. He changed the holo display to show Ambassador Chun Wei. The humans are willing to demonstrate their capabilities if the Concilium requires proof, but they've made their position clear. They won't join the Concilium as a member state. They're offering alliance and cooperation, but they will remain independent. Croth laughed, a harsh, barking sound. They think they can dictate terms to us? To the galaxy? One system, no matter how advanced, cannot stand against the combined might of the Concilium. War Master, I would advise caution, Thrick said. I saw their capabilities, or rather, I saw what they chose to show me. I believe there's much more they're keeping hidden. Then we need to see more, Croth declared. I propose we send an official delegation to Earth. Not just a single ship, but a proper diplomatic mission with appropriate military escort. Let's see how confident these humans really are when faced with real power. Admiral Vestrin nodded slowly. The War Master has a point. We need more information. Commander Thrick, would you be willing to lead another mission to Earth? This time with a full delegation. Thrick wanted to refuse. Every instinct told him that pushing humanity right now was a mistake. But he was a soldier, and soldiers followed orders. Yes, Admiral. I'll lead the mission. 3 days later, Thrick found himself aboard his flagship, leading a fleet of 30 Concilium vessels toward Earth. It wasn't a full battle group, but it was substantial enough to make a statement. Behind him were scientists, diplomats, military analysts, and intelligence officers. Everyone wanted to understand what humanity had become. As they entered the solar system, Thrick received an immediate message from Ambassador Chun. Welcome back, Commander Thrick. We're pleased that the Concilium is taking our return seriously. You and your delegation are welcome to visit Earth again. However, we ask that your military vessels remain in orbit around Mars. We hope you understand that allowing a foreign military fleet near our homeworld would be inappropriate. Croth, who had insisted on joining the mission, growled in anger. They dare to restrict our movement. This is unacceptable. It's a reasonable request, Thrick said. We wouldn't allow foreign military vessels near our homeworlds either. Reluctantly, Croth agreed. The military vessels took up positions around Mars, while Thrick led a smaller group down to Earth on diplomatic shuttles. This time, the reception was more formal. They landed at a massive complex that seemed to be humanity's center of government. The building was a marvel of architecture, blending natural materials with advanced technology in ways that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. Ambassador Chun greeted them with the same warm smile, but this time she was accompanied by a larger group. She introduced them one by one. This is Dr. James Morrison, our chief scientific advisor. You've met him before. This is General Marcus Stone, head of our military forces. This is Dr. Amara Okafor, our leading expert on artificial intelligence. And this is someone very special, Elder Yuki Tanaka. The last person was a small, elderly-looking woman with silver hair and eyes that seemed to contain millennia of wisdom. She bowed slightly. I was born on Earth before the temporal barrier was activated, Elder Tanaka said. Her voice was soft but clear. I've lived for 127,000 years. I've seen humanity at its worst and at its best. I've witnessed our entire transformation. The Concilium delegates stared at her in shock. The implications were staggering. This woman had lived longer than most civilizations had existed. How? Representative Kiksara asked. How is such longevity possible? Dr. Okafor stepped forward. We discovered that aging is ultimately a programming problem. Cells are instructed to deteriorate over time by their genetic code. We learned to rewrite that code. We also developed techniques for consciousness backup and body reconstruction. Death became optional rather than inevitable. But the psychological impact, Kiksara pressed. No species can maintain sanity over such timescales. Elder Tanaka smiled. It was difficult at first. Many of my generation didn't survive the psychological challenges of extreme longevity. But we adapted. We developed new forms of therapy, new ways of maintaining mental health across thousands of years. And we learned that having a purpose, a goal that stretches across generations, helps give life meaning. What purpose? Thrick asked. Survival, General Stone said. He was a large man with scars on his face that looked deliberately maintained. When we sealed ourselves away, we didn't know if we'd ever come back. We didn't know if the galaxy would still be here when we returned. We didn't know if we'd face friends or enemies. So we prepared for everything. Ambassador Chun gestured for them to follow her. Come, let us show you what 100,000 years of focused development looks like. They were taken to a massive facility built into the side of a mountain. Inside, Thrick saw technology that made his head spin. Factories that could build anything from the molecular level up, power generation systems that drew energy from quantum fluctuations in space itself, and weapons whose basic principles he couldn't even begin to understand. This is a standard manufacturing complex, Dr. Morrison explained. We have thousands like it across the solar system. We can produce anything we need, from food to starships, with near-perfect efficiency. Your ships, said military analyst Telvon, a Grakian known for his expertise in naval warfare. We detected thousands in orbit. How many do you actually have? General Stone smiled. Enough. That's not an answer, Telvon pressed. It's the only answer you need, Stone replied. We have enough ships to defend ourselves against any conceivable threat. That should be sufficient information. Kroth stepped forward, his massive frame towering over the human general. You're very confident for someone whose entire species lives in a single star system. The Dran Empire alone has military forces spread across 200 systems. Your technology may be advanced, but numbers matter in war. Do they? Stone asked. His tone was mild, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. War Master, humanity has spent 100,000 years studying conflict. We've run simulations of every type of warfare imaginable. We fought virtual wars against computer models of every known military force in the galaxy, refined over millennia. We've made mistakes, learned from them, and refined our strategies again and again until we achieved something close to perfection. He gestured to a display on the wall. It showed a star map of the Draken Empire. We know the location of every major Draken military installation. We know your fleet compositions, your tactics, your strategies. We've studied your history, your culture, your psychology. We know how you think, how you fight, how you make decisions under pressure. Croth's face flushed with anger. You've been spying on us. We've been learning about you, Stone corrected. There's a difference. We sent out observation probes before we dropped our temporal barrier. We've been gathering information not to attack you, but to protect ourselves. Knowledge is our first line of defense. This is an act of war, Croth roared. No, Ambassador Chun said firmly. This is an act of prudence. War Master, please understand our position. We've been isolated for 100,000 years from our perspective. We had no idea what the galaxy had become. We had no way of knowing if warlike species had conquered everything, if the concilium had fallen, or if some new threat had emerged. We took reasonable steps to gather intelligence before revealing ourselves. Any responsible government would have done the same. The Draken Empire does not appreciate being watched, Croth said. Then the Draken Empire should have better information security, Dr. Okafor said calmly. We didn't hack your systems or steal classified data. We simply monitored your public communications and analyzed your public military exercises. Everything we learned was from sources that any species with patience and good sensors could access. Thrick decided to change the subject before the situation escalated further. Ambassador, you've shown us your industrial capacity and hinted at your military power, but there's something I don't understand. Why did you really isolate yourselves? 100,000 years is an enormous sacrifice. Why not just develop normally as part of the galactic community? Elder Tanaka was the one who answered. Her ancient eyes seemed to look right through him. Because we wanted to be free, she said simply. We studied the history of young species joining the concilium. Most become junior partners dependent on older civilizations for technology, trade, and protection. They lose the drive to innovate because it's easier to buy or beg for what they need. They lose their independence because they become economically and militarily dependent on the greater galactic community. She paused, gathering her thoughts. We didn't want that fate. We wanted to join the galaxy as equals, not as children asking for scraps from the adults' table. So we chose to grow up alone, without help, without interference. It was the hardest thing humanity has ever done. We suffered. We struggled. Millions died in wars and disasters before we learned to truly unite. But we emerged stronger, more capable, and most importantly, free to choose our own destiny. Representative Kixara's crystalline body chimed thoughtfully. I begin to understand. You didn't isolate yourselves because you feared us. You isolated yourselves because you feared becoming dependent on us. Exactly, Ambassador Chen said. And now we return, offering friendship and cooperation, but not submission. We're willing to share our knowledge, to trade, and to work together on common goals. But we will not accept concilium authority over our affairs. We will not limit our military development to match concilium regulations. We will not allow our technology to be inspected and approved by concilium overseers. We are an independent power, and we will remain so. The concilium cannot accept this, Croth said flatly. We have laws, treaties, and regulations that maintain order in the galaxy. If we allow humanity to ignore these rules, every species will demand the same privileges. The entire system will collapse. Then perhaps the system needs to change, General Stone said. Perhaps it's time for the galaxy to accept that not all species want to be part of the same governmental structure. Perhaps there's room for independent powers that cooperate without surrendering sovereignty. The argument continued for hours. The concilium delegates tried every approach they could think of to convince humanity to accept some form of oversight. Ambassador Chun and her team politely but firmly refused every proposal. Finally, as Earth's sun set outside the windows of the conference room, Thrick made a decision. Ambassador Chun, he said, I think we've reached an impasse. My delegation needs to return to the concilium and report our findings. The High Council will need to decide how to proceed. Of course, Commander, Chen said. We understand. But before you go, there's one more thing I'd like to show you. Something that might help the concilium understand why we're so insistent on maintaining our independence. She led them to a secure chamber deep underground. Inside was a single object, a crystalline structure that pulsed with strange light. It looked ancient, far older than any technology Thrick had ever seen. "What is this?" he asked. "We found it on Mars," Dr. Morrison said. "Buried deep beneath the surface. It's not human technology, it's not even close. It's a data storage device created by a species that called themselves the progenitors. They existed in this galaxy millions of years before any of our current civilizations arose." "The progenitors are a myth," Kixara said. "No," Morrison replied. "They were real, and they left messages behind, messages we spent 50,000 years learning to decode." "What did the messages say?" Thrick asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know. Elder Tanaka stepped forward, her ancient eyes reflecting the strange light of the alien artifact. "They said that they seeded the galaxy with life. They said that they watched their children grow and evolve. And they said that they were destroyed by something they called the consuming dark, a force from beyond our galaxy that feeds on biological life and cannot be reasoned with or stopped by conventional means." The room went silent. Every delegate stared at the artifact. "They left instructions," Ambassador Chan said quietly. "Instructions for building a weapon that could fight the consuming dark. But the weapon would take 100,000 years to construct. It required a level of technological development that no species could reach while dealing with the normal pressures of galactic politics and warfare." "You're saying," Thrick said slowly, "that you isolated yourselves to build a weapon against a threat that may not even exist?" "We're saying that we isolated ourselves to prepare for a threat that the progenitors were certain would return," General Stone corrected. "They were an ancient civilization with technology far beyond anything that currently exists in the galaxy. If they said the consuming dark would come back, we believe them. And," Ambassador Chun added, 3 months ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected something at the galactic edge, something that matches the progenitor's description of the consuming dark's vanguard scouts." She pulled up a display showing a region of space at the very edge of the galaxy. There were strange readings, areas where stars seemed to simply disappear. "This is why we won't submit to Concilium control," Chun said. "Not because we want to conquer anyone, not because we're arrogant or power-hungry, but because we've spent 100,000 years preparing for a threat that's about to arrive. And we can't afford to be hampered by bureaucrats who don't understand what's coming." Croth stared at the display for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost its aggressive edge. "If what you're saying is true, if this consuming dark is real, then the entire galaxy needs to know. This information must be shared with the Concilium immediately." "We agree," Ambassador Chun said. "That's why we're telling you. We want the galaxy to prepare. We want to share the progenitor's knowledge, but we need the Concilium to trust us, to work with us as equals, not to try to control us." Thrick felt his world shifting. He had come to Earth expecting to deal with an arrogant species drunk on its own technological advancement. Instead, he had found a civilization that had sacrificed everything for a purpose. A civilization that had spent 100,000 years preparing for a threat that no one else even knew existed. "We need to return to the Concilium immediately," he said. "This information changes everything." As the delegates filed out, heading back to their shuttles, Thrick lingered for a moment with Ambassador Chun. "If this threat is real," he said quietly, "and if the Concilium refuses to believe you, what will you do?" Ambassador Chun looked out at Earth's dark sky, where stars glittered alongside the lights of orbital structures. "We'll fight anyway," she said. "We didn't spend 100,000 years preparing just to give up because others won't listen. If the consuming dark comes, humanity will stand against it. We'd prefer to stand with allies, but if necessary, we'll stand alone." "I hope it doesn't come to that," Thrick said. "So do we, Commander," Chin replied. "So do we." As Thrick's shuttle lifted off from Earth, carrying him back to his fleet and then to the Concilium, he knew that the galaxy was about to change. Either the Concilium would accept humanity as equals and prepare for the coming threat, or they would reject the warning and try to force humanity to submit. He prayed they would choose wisdom over pride, but he feared they would choose pride. And if they did, the galaxy would learn a very hard lesson about what 100,000 years of human determination could create. War Master Croth stood in the command center of his flagship, the Eternal Talon, and watched the strategic display with satisfaction. Around him, 300 Draken warships moved in perfect formation, the largest fleet ever assembled by his people. They were heading toward the solar system, and this time humanity would learn to respect proper authority. "Sir, we're receiving multiple warnings from the Concilium High Command," his communications officer reported. "They're ordering us to stand down and return to Draken space." "Ignore them," Kroth said. "The Concilium has become weak, afraid to use force when force is necessary. The humans need to understand their place in the galactic order." 3 weeks had passed since Commander Thrick returned from Earth with his alarming reports about the progenitors and the so-called consuming dark. The Concilium had debated endlessly, unable to decide whether humanity was telling the truth or simply trying to justify their military buildup with convenient lies about ancient threats. Kroth had no patience for endless debate. The humans had technology that upset the military balance of power. They refused to accept Concilium authority. They had to be brought to heel, and if the Concilium wouldn't do it, the Draken Empire would. "We're approaching the solar system boundary," his navigator announced. "Excellent," Kroth said. "Send the message to the humans. Tell them they have 1 hour to surrender their military command codes and allow Concilium inspection teams full access to their technology. If they refuse, we will take what we need by force." The message was transmitted. Kroth expected pleading, negotiation, or perhaps even immediate surrender. Instead, he received a simple response from Ambassador Chunwei. "War Master Kroth, you are making a terrible mistake. Turn your fleet around and return home. This is your only warning." Kroth laughed. "Did you hear that? One warning. These humans think one system can threaten the combined might of 300 Draken warships. They're about to learn a hard lesson about reality." The hour passed with no further communication from Earth. Kroth ordered his fleet forward, crossing into the solar system proper, weapons charged and ready. "All ships are prepared for combat operations," his tactical officer reported. "Target their orbital stations," Kroth ordered. "Disable, don't destroy. We want their technology intact, but make sure they understand we're serious." Before the tactical officer could respond, every alarm on the bridge started screaming at once. "Sir, we're detecting massive gravitational anomalies," the science officer shouted. "They're forming around the entire fleet." Kroth stared at the display in disbelief. Space itself seemed to be twisting around his ships. The stars outside shifted and warped. His vessels, which had been moving in perfect formation, suddenly found themselves pulled in different directions by forces that shouldn't exist. "Engines at full power," he shouted. "Break free." "It's not working, sir. The gravitational wells are too strong. We're trapped." On the tactical display, Kroth watched in horror as his proud fleet was scattered like leaves in a storm. Ships tumbled through space, unable to control their movement. Some collided with each other. Others spun wildly, their crews likely being thrown around inside. "Where are the human ships?" Kroth demanded. "Where are they attacking from?" "Sir, I don't see any human vessels," the tactical officer said, his voice shaking. "The entire defense appears to be automated. We're being attacked by the system itself." A new voice came through the communication system. It was General Marcus Stone, the human military commander. "War Master Kroth, what you're experiencing is the Solar Defense Network. It's an automated system that activates when hostile forces enter our space. Your ships are caught in artificial gravity wells generated by satellites positioned throughout the system. You cannot escape. Your weapons cannot fire because the same gravity fields that hold you are disrupting your targeting and power systems." Kroth's hands clenched into fists. "This is an act of war." "No," Stone replied calmly. "This is an act of self-defense. You entered our space with hostile intent. You threatened us, we responded. The difference is that we're not killing anyone. Your crews are safe. Your ships are undamaged. But you're completely helpless, and you'll remain that way until we decide otherwise. The Concilium will hear about this." Kroth roared. "They're already watching," Stone said. "We're broadcasting this entire encounter on all Concilium communication channels. Every species in the galaxy can see what happens when someone tries to threaten humanity with force. Ambassador Chen's face appeared on the main screen. Her expression was sad rather than triumphant. War Master, I tried to warn you. We don't want conflict. We don't want to humiliate you or your people. But we cannot and will not accept threats to our sovereignty. You came here with 300 warships to force us into submission. Now you see that such tactics won't work. You can't hold us forever, Croth said. Eventually your system will fail or we'll find a way to break free. And when we do, you'll do nothing, Chan interrupted. Because we're about to give you a demonstration of what happens if you actually make us defend ourselves actively rather than just passively restraining you. The display changed to show a region of space near Jupiter. Dozens of human ships appeared, seemingly materializing out of nothing. They were sleek and beautiful, with curves that seemed more organic than mechanical. Those are our patrol ships, General Stone explained. They're small, only about 100 meters long. Each one carries a crew of 5 humans and 3 artificial intelligences. They're our most basic military vessels. As Croth watched, the human ships began firing at targets he couldn't see, but the results of their attacks were clearly visible on his sensors. Asteroids that had been orbiting peacefully suddenly exploded into dust. A derelict satellite from pre-isolation Earth, one the size of a small building, simply vanished as if it had never existed. Our weapons are based on principles that took us 70,000 years to develop properly, Stone continued. They manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. We can increase gravity to crush objects. We can decrease it to make things fly apart. We can manipulate electromagnetic forces to disable electronics. We can even manipulate the strong and weak nuclear forces, though we don't like to do that because the results are very destructive. The demonstration continued. The human ships performed maneuvers that shouldn't have been possible, turning at impossible angles and accelerating at speeds that should have turned their crews into paste. They fired weapons that seemed to bend space itself. Our ships don't use conventional propulsion. Dr. Morrison's voice joined the broadcast. We learned to manipulate space-time directly. Our vessels create bubbles of altered space around themselves. Inside the bubble, inertia works differently. We can accelerate, turn, or stop without the crew feeling anything. And our AI pilots can process information and react millions of times faster than biological brains. Croth felt his heart sinking. Every piece of the demonstration was a lesson in just how outmatched his fleet truly was. The humans weren't just more advanced. They were operating on a completely different level of technology. I think we've made our point, Ambassador Chen said. War Master, we're going to release your ships now. We're also going to repair any damage caused by the gravitational fields. Your fleet will be returned to you in perfect condition. Why? Croth asked. The fight had gone out of him. He felt humiliated, defeated without a single shot being fired. Because we don't want to be your enemy, Chun said simply. We want the galaxy to understand that we can defend ourselves, but we don't want to hurt anyone if we can avoid it. You came here with hostile intent, but we're choosing to respond with mercy. The gravitational fields around the Draken fleet began to dissipate. Ships slowly regained control of their systems. Engineering crews reported that all damage was being repaired by some kind of automated drones that had appeared from nowhere. There is one condition, General Stone said. Every ship in your fleet now has a complete recording of what happened here stored in its computer systems. These recordings cannot be deleted or altered. They're encoded at the hardware level. When you return to Drakenspace, these recordings will automatically upload to your military networks and to the public galactic communication grid. Croth understood immediately. The humans were ensuring that everyone would know what had happened. There would be no hiding this defeat, no spinning it as anything other than what it was. You're making an enemy of the Draken Empire, he said quietly. No, Chen replied. We're making sure the Draken Empire understands reality. War Master, your people are warriors, we respect that. But there are different kinds of strength. You came here thinking that numbers and conventional military power would be enough. You were wrong. We spent 100,000 years preparing for threats much worse than anything the current galaxy can offer. Do you really think we didn't plan for this exact scenario? What happens now? Croth asked. Now you go home, Chin said. You tell your empire what you learned here. You tell them that humanity cannot be intimidated or conquered. And then, when they've had time to absorb that information, we hope they'll be willing to talk to us as equals. And if they want revenge? Croth asked. Then they'll learn the same lesson you learned today, but perhaps more harshly, General Stone said. We showed you our defensive capabilities. We didn't show you what we can do when we go on the offensive. And trust me, War Master, you don't want to see that. The Draken fleet began its long, humiliating journey back to their space. Croth sat in his command chair, staring at nothing. He had been a warrior his entire life. He had led fleets to victory against pirate armadas and rebellious colonies. He had never known defeat like this. But what bothered him most wasn't the defeat itself. It was the casual ease with which the humans had achieved it. They hadn't even needed to send their ships to fight him. Their automated defenses had been more than enough. His entire fleet, 300 of the most powerful warships in the Draken military, had been defeated by what the humans considered a basic defensive system. What else did they have? What other weapons and capabilities were they hiding? And if they were this powerful, why were they so insistent on independence? Why not conquer the galaxy and rule it directly? The answer came to him slowly. It wasn't that the humans didn't have the power to conquer. It was that they didn't want to. They had spent 100,000 years developing not just technology, but philosophy and culture. They had evolved beyond the simple desire for domination, which Croth realized with bitter irony made them more dangerous, not less. An enemy who wanted conquest could be understood, negotiated with, perhaps even allied with. But an enemy who simply wanted to be left alone, who would defend themselves with overwhelming force, yet had no interest in attacking others, was something the galaxy had never seen before. Across the galaxy, recordings of the Draken fleet's humiliation spread like wildfire. Every species saw what happened. Every government analyzed the data. Every military strategist tried to understand how the humans had done what they did. And everywhere, the same questions were being asked. How powerful were the humans really? What else were they capable of? And most importantly, how should the galaxy respond to a species that had clearly become a superpower but didn't act like any superpower in history? In the Concilium High Council chambers, the debate reached new levels of intensity. Some representatives argued for immediate military action, claiming that humanity was too dangerous to be left unchecked. Others argued for diplomacy and cooperation, pointing out that attacking humanity would be suicidal. Commander Thrick, who had been promoted to admiral after his successful first contact mission, stood before the council and offered his perspective. Honored representatives, I've met with the humans multiple times. I've walked on their home world. I've spoken with beings who have lived for over 100,000 years. And I've come to understand something important. They're not lying about the progenitors or the consuming dark. You can't know that for certain, Representative Kixara said. No, Thrick admitted. But I can make an educated judgment based on their behavior. If they wanted to conquer us, they could have done it already. If they wanted to dominate the galaxy, they would have emerged from their isolation with their fleets deployed and started taking territory. Instead, they offered alliance and cooperation. They only demonstrated their military power when we forced their hand by sending a hostile fleet into their space. So you're saying we should just accept them? Asked Representative Dulker of the Festion Alliance. I'm saying we should be smart, Thrick replied. Humanity has technology that's centuries beyond ours. They have defenses we can't penetrate and weapons we can't counter. But they're willing to share their knowledge if we treat them as equals. That's an incredible opportunity. Or an incredible trap, muttered someone in the back rows. The debate continued for days, but slowly a consensus began to form. The galaxy had to accept that humanity was now a major power. The question was how to integrate them into the existing political structure without losing face or admitting that the Concilium's authority was limited. Back on Earth, Ambassador Chun watched the galactic political theater unfold with a mixture of amusement and concern. They're going to take months to make a decision, General Stone said, standing beside her. That's fine, Chun replied. We have time. The consuming dark's vanguard is still far away. We have maybe a year, possibly two, before they reach inhabited space. Are we sure they're coming here? Stone asked. Chun pulled up a star map showing the galactic edge. The area where the strange readings had been detected was growing larger. They're coming, she said. The progenitors were clear about this. The consuming dark feeds on biological life. They strip planets of all organic matter and use it to fuel their expansion. They won't stop until they've consumed everything, or until something stops them. Then we need the Concilium to listen, Stone said. We can't fight this alone. They'll listen eventually, Chun replied. Either because they choose wisdom or because the consuming dark forces them to. I just hope it's the former rather than the latter. She turned away from the display and looked out at Earth below. Humanity had spent 100,000 years preparing for this moment. They had transformed themselves from a young, naive species into something powerful and capable. They had built weapons that could crack planets and defenses that could stop any conventional attack. But the consuming dark wasn't conventional. It was the threat that had destroyed the progenitors, a civilization far more advanced than humanity at its current level. Even with all their preparation, Chun wasn't sure it would be enough. That's why they needed allies. That's why they needed the galaxy to stop seeing them as a threat and start seeing them as what they truly were. The first and best line of defense against something that wanted to consume all life in the galaxy. The demonstration to Kroth had been necessary. The galaxy needed to understand that humanity couldn't be bullied or forced. But Chun hoped it would also show something else, that humanity's power was controlled, measured, and used with restraint. They could have destroyed the Draken fleet. Instead, they had simply held it, demonstrated their capabilities, and let it go. That restraint, Chun hoped, would speak louder than any display of raw power. Now they just had to wait and see if the galaxy was wise enough to listen, because time was running out and the consuming dark was coming whether the galaxy believed it or not. Director Saline of Concilium Intelligence hadn't slept properly in 3 weeks. The 8 eyes arranged around her spherical head were bloodshot and tired. Her tentacles moved restlessly as she prepared her presentation for the High Council, organizing data that terrified her more with each passing day. Directors, the situation is worse than we thought, she began, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones of stress in her species. Holographic displays appeared around the council chamber, showing networks of data, communication intercepts, and analysis reports. 3 months ago, we began a comprehensive investigation into human activities since their return. What we discovered should concern every species in this chamber. She manipulated the display, zooming in on a timeline. Approximately 14 months ago, long before the soul temporal barrier collapsed, we started detecting anomalies in our communication networks. Strange patterns in data traffic, brief moments where our systems showed activity that shouldn't have been there. Representative Kixara's crystalline body chimed with alarm. Are you saying the humans infiltrated our networks before they even revealed themselves? Yes, Saline said bluntly. We've identified traces of highly sophisticated AI agents operating within galactic networks. They're not viruses or malware in the traditional sense. They're more like observers watching and learning. We believe the humans deployed them months before dropping their temporal barrier. How deep does the infiltration go? Admiral Vestrin asked. Saline's tentacles drooped with dismay. Deep. Very deep. We found evidence of human monitoring in military communications, trade networks, scientific databases, and even private civilian channels. They've been observing us, learning our languages, studying our cultures, and mapping our political structures. War Master Kroth, still recovering from the humiliation at Seoul, slammed his fist on his console. This is exactly what I warned about. The humans are a threat to galactic security. Perhaps, Saline said, or perhaps they were being cautious. Director Kim of Earth's External Intelligence Service has agreed to meet with me. With the Council's permission, I'd like to hear their explanation before we draw conclusions. The Council debated for an hour before agreeing. 2 days later, Saline found herself in a secure conference facility on a neutral station. Sitting across from Sarah Kim, the human intelligence director with the cybernetic eye. Director Celine, Kim said with a polite nod. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I understand you have concerns about our intelligence-gathering activities. Concerns is putting it mildly, Celine replied. Your AI agents have penetrated virtually every major network in the galaxy. This is an unprecedented act of espionage. Kim leaned back in her chair. Let me ask you something, Director. If your people were about to emerge from isolation after 100,000 years, not knowing what the galaxy had become, what would you do? I would gather intelligence first, Celine admitted. Exactly, and that's what we did. We sent out stealth probes and AI observation platforms before we dropped the temporal barrier. We needed to know what we were returning to. Was the galaxy at peace or at war? Had the concilium survived? Had new threats emerged? We had no way of knowing, so we looked. But the extent of your infiltration, we observed. We didn't interfere, Kim interrupted. We didn't change data. We didn't sabotage systems. We didn't steal classified military secrets. We monitored public communications, observed military exercises from long range, and analyzed cultural broadcasts. Everything we learned came from sources that weren't technically secured. Celine's tentacles rippled with frustration. That's a fine distinction that I'm not sure many will accept. I understand, Kim said. That's why I'm going to be completely honest with you about something that will make this situation much more complicated. She pulled up a holographic display. We know about the secret meetings between Draken hardliners and certain Concilium military officials. We know about the plans being discussed for a coordinated strike against Earth. We knew about Kroth's attack 3 weeks before it happened. Celine felt her body temperature drop. How much do you know? Everything, Kim said flatly. We know about the faction within the Concilium that wants to force humanity to submit. We know about the species that are afraid of us and the species that want to use us. We know which representatives voted for peaceful contact and which ones argued for military action in your closed sessions. Our council chambers are supposed to be secure, Celine said. They are by galactic standards, Kim replied. But we've had 100,000 years to develop surveillance technology. Director, I'm not telling you this to threaten you. I'm telling you because you need to understand something important. We're not spying on you because we want to conquer you. We're doing it because we need to protect ourselves from factions in your government that want to destroy or control us. She changed the display to show a star map of the galactic rim. And more importantly, we're monitoring everything because the consuming dark is real, and we need to know when it arrives. Celine stared at the map. You really believe in this ancient threat? We don't believe in it. We know it exists. We've been monitoring the galactic edge for decades by our internal timeline. We've watched stars go dark. We've detected strange energy signatures. We've even intercepted what we think are scout ships from the consuming dark, though they destroyed themselves before we could capture them. Kim's expression grew serious. Director, the progenitors left extensive records. They described the consuming dark in detail. They explained how it operates, how it spreads, how it consumes. And most importantly, they explained that it always returns. Why should I believe you? Celine asked. Because I'm about to give you something that proves we're not your enemy, Kim said. She pulled out a data chip. This contains evidence of every infiltration we've conducted, every AI agent we've deployed, every communication we've monitored. Complete transparency. You can take this to your council and expose everything we've done. Celine stared at the chip. Why would you do this? Because time is running out, Kim said quietly. The consuming dark's vanguard will reach inhabited space within a year, maybe less. We need the galaxy to stop seeing us as a threat and start preparing for the real enemy. If exposing our intelligence operations helps accomplish that, then it's worth it. Celine took the chip carefully. This could destroy any trust between our peoples. Or it could build trust by showing we're willing to be honest, even when honesty makes us vulnerable, Kim replied. That's your choice to make, Director. Use the information however you think is best for the galaxy. Celine returned to the Concilium and presented her findings to the High Council in a closed emergency session. The reaction was explosive. Some representatives called for immediate sanctions against humanity. Others argued that human transparency was a positive sign. The debate raged for days. Then something happened that changed everything. A colony world at the galactic edge, a Draken mining operation called Karseeth Prime, went silent. All communication stopped. Relief ships were dispatched immediately. When they arrived, they found a nightmare. The planet's surface had been stripped. Not destroyed, but harvested. Every living thing was gone. The colonists, the native plant life, even the bacteria in the soil, all of it had been removed. The buildings still stood, but they were empty. The machines still functioned, but there was no one to operate them. And there were bodies, or rather, things that had once been bodies. The relief crews found them wandering the empty streets, twisted and wrong. Dead Draken colonists that somehow still moved. Their bodies changed into something that shouldn't be possible. When the relief ships tried to help, the transformed colonists attacked with inhuman strength and speed. The relief ships barely escaped. They brought back video footage that was immediately classified at the highest level of security. But Celine saw it. She saw the empty planet and the twisted bodies. She saw exactly what Ambassador Chun had warned them about. The consuming dark had arrived. An emergency session of the High Council was called. This time, Ambassador Chun was invited to attend via hologram. Her face appeared above the council floor, life-sized and serious. "I wish I could say I told you so," Chun began. "But there's no satisfaction in being right about this. The attack on Karseeth Prime matches exactly what the progenitor records described. The consuming dark sends vanguard ships to harvest biological material from isolated worlds. They take everything living and transform it into soldiers for their main force." "How do we fight them?" Admiral Vestrin asked. "That's complicated," General Stone said, appearing beside Chen's hologram. "The consuming dark isn't a conventional enemy. They don't negotiate. They don't retreat. They don't have supply lines to disrupt or leaders to eliminate. They're more like a force of nature than an army. But they can be fought," Chen added. "The progenitors developed weapons against them. We've refined those weapons over the past 100,000 years. We can stop them, but not alone. We need the entire galaxy to coordinate its defenses." "What are you proposing?" Representative Kixara asked. "A defensive alliance," Chen said. "Not concilium membership, not submission to your authority, but a genuine partnership. We share our weapons technology. We share the progenitor's knowledge. We coordinate our military forces. And most importantly, we share our temporal acceleration technology." The council chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. "You would give us access to temporal technology?" Admiral Vestrin asked, his face tentacles bright with surprise. "Yes," Chen said. "We propose creating temporal acceleration bubbles around key industrial worlds. Not for 100,000 years like we did, but for shorter periods, 10 years outside, 1,000 years inside. That would give each species time to build up their defenses, develop new weapons, and prepare for what's coming." "There must be a catch," Kroth said suspiciously. "There is," General Stone said. "It's dangerous. The temporal fields require enormous energy to maintain. If they fail, the results can be catastrophic. And spending time inside an acceleration field changes people and cultures. We know that better than anyone. But desperate times require desperate measures. We need to verify what happened at Karseeth Prime," Representative Dulker said. "Send our own investigators. Not just rely on Draken reports." "Do it," Chen said. "Send anyone you want. But do it quickly. We're detecting more Vanguard ships heading for other worlds on the galactic edge. The consuming dark is starting its invasion, and it won't stop until it's consumed everything or we stop it." Over the next few days, multiple Concilium investigation teams visited Karseeth Prime. They all returned with the same grim reports. The planet had been harvested. The colonists had been transformed into something monstrous. Analysis of the transformed bodies revealed technology completely alien, unlike anything any known species possessed. The evidence was undeniable. The consuming dark was real. Commander Thrick, now leading the Concilium's response coordination, worked closely with General Stone to develop a defense strategy. They identified worlds most at risk and began evacuating them. They established early warning sensor networks at the galactic edge. And most importantly, they began the delicate process of sharing technology. Human engineers arrived on Concilium worlds, teaching the basics of progenitor technology. It was like trying to teach advanced mathematics to children, Stone explained, not because the Concilium species weren't intelligent, but because they lacked the foundational knowledge humanity had spent thousands of years developing. But they tried. Every species contributed what they could. The Zephrons provided expertise in energy management. The Methodians offered their crystalline computing technology. The Kryn contributed their deep understanding of biology and genetics. Even the Draken, swallowing their pride, shared their advanced metallurgy and weapons design. Slowly, painfully, a unified defense began to take shape. But Celine remained troubled. She met with Sarah Kim again, this time on Earth itself. "Why are you really helping us?" she asked. "You could have let the consuming dark weaken the Concilium and then swept in to dominate everyone. Why risk your people for civilizations that threatened you just months ago?" Kim took her to a memorial on Earth, a massive wall carved with names. Billions of names. "These are the people who died during our isolation," Kim explained. "Wars, accidents, disasters. We lost so many before we learned to truly unite. And do you know what the survivors learned? That life is precious. That civilization is precious. That diversity of thought and culture makes us stronger, not weaker." She turned to face Celine directly. "We spent 100,000 years becoming powerful, Director. But we also spent that time becoming wise. We learned that power without purpose is meaningless. We learned that strength exists to protect the weak, not to dominate them. We're helping you because it's the right thing to do, and because a galaxy with diverse civilizations is more valuable than a galaxy ruled by one species, even if that species is us." Celine looked at the memorial wall, at the billions of names representing billions of lives. She thought about her own people, the Concilium, and all the species that called the galaxy home. And she realized that Sarah Kim was telling the truth. Humanity wasn't helping out of calculation or strategic advantage. They were helping because they had evolved beyond that. They had become something the galaxy had never seen before, a species with overwhelming power, and the wisdom not to abuse it. "The galaxy is lucky you chose isolation instead of conquest," Celine said quietly. "No," Kim replied. "The galaxy is lucky that we chose to come back at all. We could have stayed in our temporal bubble forever, safe and isolated while the universe moved on without us. But we chose to return because we understood something important. Survival alone isn't enough. We want to live in a galaxy filled with other voices, other perspectives, other species pursuing their own destinies." She smiled sadly. "Even if that means risking everything to defend civilizations that don't trust us yet." As Celine prepared to leave Earth, she looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the visible stars, the consuming dark was coming. A threat so terrible it had destroyed the most advanced civilization the galaxy had ever known. But for the first time since this crisis began, she felt something unexpected. Hope. Because humanity had spent 100,000 years preparing for this moment. They had built weapons that could manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. They had developed defenses that could protect entire star systems. And most importantly, they had developed the wisdom to share those capabilities with others instead of hoarding them. The galaxy was about to face its greatest test. But it wouldn't face that test alone. Humanity had returned not as conquerors or overlords but as defenders. And that made all the difference. The warning came at dawn, Concilium Standard Time. Every sensor station along the galactic rim lit up simultaneously with alerts that sent panic through every military command center in known space. The consuming dark's main force had arrived, and it was larger than anyone had imagined. Admiral Thuk stood in the joint command center that had been hastily established on the Concilium capital world. Around him, holographic displays showed the tactical situation. It looked hopeless. Hundreds of enemy vessels were pouring through the galactic rim, moving toward inhabited space like a tide of darkness. "How many?" he asked his tactical officer. "We're still counting, sir. At least 400 large vessels, possibly more. And they're accompanied by thousands of smaller craft. Many of those smaller ships match the profile of the harvested colonists from Karseith Prime." General Marcus Stone appeared via hologram, his face grim. "They're using the dead as soldiers, just like the progenitor record said they would. Every world they harvest gives them more troops for the next attack." "How long until they reach inhabited space?" Thick asked. 3 days at their current speed," Stone replied. "We're mobilizing the defense fleet now. Every ship humanity has is being deployed to the barrier line." The barrier line was a defensive position that had been established over the past 8 months. It was a chain of fortified stations and sensor networks stretching across the most likely invasion routes. Human engineers had worked with Concilium forces to build it, combining technologies from dozens of species into a unified defensive system. But looking at the size of the enemy force, Thuk wasn't sure it would be enough. "We need to evacuate the rim worlds," he said. "Get everyone away from the path of their advance." "Already in progress," reported Commander Velsina, his Zephyrin coordination officer. "But we won't get everyone out in time. Some colonies are too remote or too slow to evacuate." Thuk felt the weight of command pressing down on him. He was responsible for coordinating the defense of the entire galactic rim. Billions of lives depended on the decisions he made in the next few hours. "General Stone, what's the status of the human fleet?" "We have 2,000 capital ships deployed along the barrier line," Stone replied. "Each one is equipped with progenitor-based weapons and defenses. We also have 20,000 smaller vessels providing support. And we've shared our defensive technology with the Concilium forces, so your ships should be able to withstand at least some of what's coming." "Will it be enough?" Thuk asked bluntly. Stone was silent for a moment. "Honestly, Admiral, I don't know. The progenitors fought the consuming dark and lost. They were more advanced than we are now, but they fought alone, each species trying to defend itself independently. We have something they didn't. We have unity." Ambassador Chunwei appeared beside Stone's hologram. Despite the crisis, her face was calm and composed. "Admiral Thuk, I need to tell you something that we've kept secret until now. The weapon the progenitors designed, the one that took us 100,000 years to build, it's ready. But using it comes with a terrible cost." "What kind of cost?" Thuk asked. "The weapon is essentially a reality restructuring device," Dr. Morrison said, joining the holographic conference. "It creates a wave of altered spacetime that disrupts the fundamental forces the consuming dark uses to exist. But the wave is indiscriminate. It will destroy the consuming dark, but it will also severely damage any conventional matter it encounters. Using it means sacrificing everything in a large radius." Thuk felt his blood run cold. "How large a radius?" "Approximately 2,000 light-years," Chun said quietly. "Any inhabited world in that radius would be rendered uninhabitable. Any ship would be torn apart. It would create a dead zone in the galaxy." "Then we can't use it," Thuk said immediately. "Not unless we have no other choice," Chun agreed. "That's why we're fighting conventionally first. But if the barrier line falls, if the consuming dark breaks through and starts harvesting inhabited worlds, we'll have to make a terrible decision. Sacrifice a portion of the galaxy to save the rest." "Let's make sure it doesn't come to that," Thuk said. The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. Ships moved into position along the barrier line. Evacuation fleets worked around the clock to move civilians from threatened worlds. Engineers made last-minute adjustments to defensive systems. And everyone waited. On the 3rd day, the consuming dark reached the barrier line. Thuk watched from the command center as the first enemy vessels appeared on the tactical display. They were massive, each one larger than the biggest Draken battleships. Their hulls were organic-looking, covered in strange growths that seemed to pulse with unhealthy light. "All stations report ready," Commander Velsina announced. Engage when they enter weapons range, Thuk ordered. The battle began with humanity's long-range weapons firing first. Beams of twisted spacetime reached out across the void, striking the enemy vessels. Several of the consuming dark ships simply came apart, torn to pieces by gravitational forces they couldn't withstand. But more kept coming. For every ship destroyed, 2 more appeared to take its place. The Concilium forces opened fire as the enemy came into their range. Conventional weapons had been modified with human technology to be more effective. Energy weapons enhanced with gravitational lensing, missiles that could manipulate their own mass to increase impact force. Even the oldest Draken ships had been upgraded with new systems. The space around the barrier line became a storm of weapon fire and explosions. The consuming dark ships fired back with weapons that seemed to warp reality itself. Their projectiles twisted and turned in impossible ways. When they hit, they didn't just damage ships, they corrupted them, turning metal and circuitry into something organic and wrong. Station 7 is reporting heavy damage, Velsina called out. They're requesting support. Redirect the 3rd Human Battle Group to assist, Thuk ordered. On the tactical display, human ships moved with impossible grace and speed. They dove into the thickest fighting, their weapons cutting through enemy vessels with precision. But even with humanity's advanced technology, the battle was brutal. A Zephyrin cruiser took a direct hit and began transforming, its hull growing strange organic protrusions. The crew evacuated in escape pods seconds before the ship's reactor went critical, destroying itself rather than becoming a tool of the enemy. The enemy is deploying their harvested troops, Stone reported. Small craft were launching from the larger enemy vessels, each one carrying what had once been living beings from Karseith Prime and other harvested worlds. These twisted soldiers attacked with suicidal fury, trying to board Concilium ships. All ships, activate close-range defenses, Thuk commanded. Don't let anything get aboard. The battle raged for hours. Both sides suffered heavy losses. The barrier line held, but barely. Thuk could see the tactical situation deteriorating. The enemy had more ships than they had estimated, and they kept coming. Admiral, we're detecting a massive energy surge from the enemy fleet, Velsina said, her voice tight with fear. Something big is coming through. On the display, space itself seemed to tear open. Through the rift came a vessel that dwarfed everything else on the battlefield. It was kilometers long, a massive construct of organic and mechanical elements fused together in ways that hurt to look at. That's a harvester ship, Dr. Morrison said, his voice shaking. The progenitor records mentioned them. They're command vessels that coordinate the entire invasion. If that ship breaks through, it will head straight for the nearest inhabited world and consume everything. All forces, concentrate fire on that vessel, Thuk ordered. Every ship in the defense fleet turned their weapons on the massive harvester. Human beam weapons carved burning lines across its hull. Concilium missiles slammed into its surface by the hundreds. The combined firepower of dozens of species focused on a single target. The harvester ship shuddered under the assault. Parts of its hull broke away, burning as they drifted through space. But it kept coming, slowly but inexorably advancing toward the barrier line. We're not going to stop it, General Stone said. Admiral, we need to use the weapon. No, Thuk said. There are still evacuation fleets in the affected zone. Give them time to get clear. We might not have time, Stone argued. If that ship breaks through. I said no, Thuk repeated firmly. We fight until we can't fight anymore. We don't sacrifice millions of civilians while there's still a chance to stop this conventionally. War Master Kroth's face appeared on another holographic display. The old warrior looked battered and tired, but his eyes still burned with determination. Admiral Thuk, the Draken Empire has a proposition. We have a battle group of 50 ships near the Harvester's position. We can perform a ramming attack, overload our reactors, and detonate them inside the enemy vessel. It might be enough to destroy it. That would be a suicide mission, Thuk said. Yes, Kroth agreed. But my people are warriors. We understand sacrifice. Let us do this. Let us prove that the Draken Empire fights for the galaxy, not just for itself. Thuk looked at the tactical display. The harvester was getting closer to breaking through the barrier line. If it succeeded, the entire defensive strategy would collapse. "Do it," he said quietly. "And Kroth, thank you." The old War Master smiled, a fierce and proud expression. "It has been an honor, Admiral. Tell the galaxy that the Draken fought well." The hologram disconnected. On the tactical display, Thuk watched as 50 Draken warships broke formation and accelerated directly toward the massive harvester. They fired every weapon they had as they closed, not trying to avoid return fire, simply racing forward as fast as their engines could push them. The consuming dark smaller ships tried to intercept, but the Draken vessels were moving too fast. One by one, they slammed into the harvester's hull, each ship's reactor going critical on impact. The explosions were like small suns blooming against the darkness of space. The harvester ship shuddered. Its advance stopped, and then, with a terrible groaning that somehow seemed to echo through the vacuum of space, it began to break apart. The massive vessel collapsed in on itself, torn apart by the combined force of 50 reactor detonations happening simultaneously within its structure. The command center was silent as everyone watched the harvester die. Then Commander Velsina spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "Sir, the enemy fleet is breaking off. They're retreating back toward the galactic rim." It was true. Without their command ship, the consuming Dark's forces were falling back, withdrawing from the battle. The defense had held, but the cost had been terrible. Thuk looked at the casualty reports scrolling across his display. Thousands of ships destroyed, tens of thousands of crew members dead, 3 stations completely lost, and 50 Draken vessels, with all hands, sacrificed to stop the harvester. "We won," General Stone said, but his voice held no triumph, only exhaustion. "For now," Ambassador Chen added. "But they'll be back. The consuming Dark doesn't give up. They'll regroup and attack again. Then we'll be ready," Thuk said. "We held the line once. We can do it again." Over the following weeks, the galaxy came to terms with what had happened. The battle at the barrier line became known as the First Stand, and everyone understood there would be more battles to come. But something had changed. The different species of the Concilium had fought together, truly together, for the first time in history. They had seen human ships sacrifice themselves to protect Zephron stations. They had watched Draken warriors give their lives to save billions of beings they'd never met. They had witnessed what unity could accomplish. The political debates about humanity's status quietly died away. No one questioned anymore whether humans should be independent. They had earned their place as equals through blood and sacrifice. More importantly, they had proven that their power was matched by their willingness to use it in defense of others. Ambassador Chun met with Thuk one final time before returning to Earth. "The weapon is still ready," she said. "If the consuming Dark comes back with overwhelming force, we can use it. But I hope we never have to make that choice." "So do I," Thuk said. "Ambassador, I owe your people an apology. When you first returned, I saw you as a threat. I was wrong." "You were being cautious," Chen replied. "That's not wrong. But I'm glad you gave us a chance to prove ourselves." She looked out at the stars through the station's viewport. Humanity spent 100,000 years preparing for this war. We built weapons and defenses beyond anything the current galaxy had achieved. But the most important thing we built wasn't technology, it was wisdom. We learned that true strength isn't about dominating others. It's about standing beside them when darkness comes. "The progenitors would be proud," Thuk said. "Maybe," Chen said. "Or maybe they'd be disappointed that it took the threat of extinction to bring the galaxy together. But either way, we're here now. We're unified, and we'll face whatever comes next together." She extended her hand in the human gesture of friendship. Thuk grasped it firmly. "Together," he agreed. As Ambassador Chen's ship departed, heading back toward the blue and green world that humanity called home, Thuk stood at the viewport and thought about the future. The consuming Dark would return. There would be more battles, more sacrifices, more losses. But the galaxy was no longer a collection of separate species looking out for their own interests. It had become something greater, a unified civilization, diverse in its peoples but united in purpose. Humanity had returned after 1,000 years of absence. But they hadn't returned to conquer or dominate. They had returned to fulfill the purpose that the progenitors had intended when they seeded the galaxy with life so long ago. To be the shield that protected all the children of the stars, to stand against the darkness no matter the cost, to ensure that life in all its beautiful diversity would continue to flourish. Earth had been gone for 1,000 years, but it had returned with power that no empire could contain. Power tempered by wisdom that no empire had ever achieved. And that made all the difference. In the depths of space, beyond the galactic rim, the consuming dark gathered its forces and prepared for the next assault. It had failed once, but it was patient. It had destroyed the progenitors. It would eventually destroy their children too. Or so it believed. But the consuming dark didn't understand something important. It didn't understand that sometimes the children surpass their parents, that sometimes giving a young species 100,000 years to grow and develop creates something unprecedented. The progenitors had been powerful, but they had fought alone. Humanity was powerful too, but they didn't fight alone. They fought alongside 47 other species, each one contributing their unique strength to the defense. And in the Sol system, deep beneath the surface of Earth, the reality restructuring weapon waited, a final option, a terrible choice that humanity hoped they would never have to make. But if that choice came, if the darkness threatened to consume everything, humanity would not hesitate. They had spent 100,000 years preparing not just to survive, but to ensure that others survive too. Because that was what true power meant. Not the ability to destroy, but the willingness to sacrifice everything to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Earth had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same. The age of isolation was over. The age of unity had begun. And in that unity there was hope. Hope that the darkness could be held back. Hope that life would triumph over oblivion. Hope that the children of the progenitors would finish what their ancient ancestors had started and drive the consuming dark back into the void from which it came. The war was far from over. But for the first time, the galaxy had a real chance to win it. And it was all because one species had chosen to disappear for 1,000 years, to grow in isolation, and to return, not as conquerors but as defenders. Humanity had gone away. Humanity had transformed itself. And humanity had come back when the galaxy needed them most. That was the true meaning of power. Not strength alone, but strength combined with purpose. Not technology alone, but technology guided by wisdom. Not independence alone, but independence used in service of something greater. The consuming dark had made a terrible mistake. It had given humanity 100,000 years to prepare. And now it would learn what happens when you give humans enough time to become truly dangerous. Not dangerous to the innocent, but dangerous to those who threaten the innocent. The first stand had been won. The war had just begun. And humanity, along with their new allies, was ready to fight it, no matter how long it took, no matter what it cost. Because that's what defenders do. They stand. They hold the line. And they never, ever give up. Not while there's still something worth protecting. Not while there's still life in the galaxy worth defending. Not while there's still hope that tomorrow can be better than today. Earth had returned. And the galaxy would survive. Together.